walk me down the aisle, which is not a bad thing. Her boyfriend is a really nice man. The only issue was that like I didn't really know him by that time. Like I know him, I know him as my mother's boyfriend, but like we don't sit, we don't talk, like, and he makes an effort to like sit and talk and get to know me and things like that. But I picked my brother-in-law because I knew him. Like I've known my brother-in-law since I was probably 7 or 8 years old. And if I'm in my 30s, you can do the math, right? So he and I have like a bit of a bond. My mother's boyfriend and I, not so much. And like I said, going back to the father figures conversation, I've had a few father figures in my life. I really only have, I can only honestly think about it right now. I can only think of like one off the top of my head. And that was my mother's ex-boyfriend. Now, growing up, he was the only father that I knew. He was the only dad I knew. He and my mom were dating from the time I was like 5 or 6. And I grew up knowing him like as my mom's boyfriend, and like he was like a dad to me. And it was just always like this like weird thing as I was growing up and I was becoming more conscious of the relationship, because I remember when I was younger, I wanted so much to call him daddy. Like I wanted very much to call him daddy. And I didn't call him daddy because he was not my biological father. So I wouldn't call him daddy. And I didn't like calling him by his first name. And I didn't want to do that uncle thing because that shit's just mad gross to me. Like, I don't like the idea of like, I mean, like I get it. And I get the culture behind it, but I just think it's really creepy, like, to be calling somebody, oh, that's my uncle, when it's not your uncle. And, like, even still, like, why would you call, like, your parent or your relatives, like, significant other uncle? Unless it's not your parent, like, don't call them uncle. It's one thing if, like, it's your cousin's boyfriend, your older cousin's boyfriend, you can be like, oh, that's Uncle Tim, or your aunt's boyfriend, oh, that's Uncle John. But when it's your mom's boyfriend, to call him uncle, that sounds gross because it sounds like your mom's fucking her brother, and we're not in Alabama, so let's stop that. But yeah, so I wanted so much, very much, to call him daddy, and I couldn't call him daddy because he was not my dad. He was not my father. And I didn't like calling him by his first name, but I had to do it. As I got older, I got other nicknames. Like I made nicknames for him, which is why I'm like very big on nicknames with people, because that's the only way that I can express how, I am with folks. Like all my nieces and my nephews have nicknames, and very specific nicknames that I and only I call them. Other people may co-opt those nicknames that I create for them because they're just so fucking cool. But I give nicknames because, I don't like calling my niece, oh, that's my niece. Like, that's Ming Ming. My nephew is Bun Bun. Like, their baby brother is Scooter Pooter. Like, they all have names, and there are meanings behind the names. There's reasons why we call them what we call them. My baby niece is Boopski Doo Doo, and she knows why she's Boopski Doo Doo. And at the age of 1 and, what is she? Let's see. At the age of 1 and like 9 months, if I yell Boopski Doo Doo, she turns around because she knows that's her name. And again, I'm sorry, I digress. So, with it, when it came to him, I called him Sanddaddy, and the correlation with calling him Sanddaddy, even if you care or you don't, guess what? I'm going to talk about it. Is because he looked very much like my mom's best friend's husband. So we used to call my mom's best friend's husband Sanddaddy, or at the very least, his granddaughter used to call him Sanddaddy because she couldn't say granddaddy, so she used to say Sanddaddy. And upon me hearing that, and everyone saying that my mom's best friend's husband looked very much like my mom's boyfriend, I started calling him Sanddaddy as well. And it kind of just stuck. Like, I don't think he even knew that's why I was calling him Sanddaddy. I think he thought I was calling him that because I wanted to call him daddy without saying daddy, but it worked. but he was a father figure that I had growing up, and I appreciated having him as a father figure. Growing up with my mother was not the easiest. And when I say that, I don't mean like my mother was a terrible human being and like she used to beat us and like treat us like shit and like not feed us and like stuff us in closets and stuff like that. Like it wasn't anything like that. But my mother was very strict, and she was very strict, and she was, overly cautious and overprotective. And the reason she was all of those things is because why? You guessed it, because we didn't have our dad around. We didn't have our father around, and it was just her. And so it was this single woman raising 3 young girls in America by herself. And in not wanting anything to happen to her 3 young girls, my mother became this giant umbrella over us, if you will, where at times it felt like we couldn't see past our feet. At the very least, I'm speaking for myself. I don't know how my sisters felt, but I couldn't see past my feet on the street. All I could see is the tips, the ends of the umbrella, and that's how it felt. And she was that way because, again, she had to raise us by herself. It wasn't like we had a male figure, a constant male figure in the home that was teaching us the things about the world that can only be taught from a male perspective. And I think I envy those people out there who have that. Like I didn't have a man to talk to me about men. I didn't have a man to talk to me about boys and the games that they play to show girls how they like them and the things they might say in order to make them, want to be with them and all that other shit. Like I didn't have that, and I didn't have that male paternal figure who was like a protector. I only ever had a mama bear, and she was a ferocious mama bear. And it's like, while I did, I 100% understand and appreciate a lot of her guarding and her protection. It's a certain level of protection that a woman can give as a mother that a father can, that does not erase or compare to that of a father. In going to therapy, like I've learned that, a lot of the things that we do, a lot of the relationships that we have are reflections of things that we've seen and that we know, and all the other good shit, all that. I don't know if it's Freudian or whatever the fuck that is. But it would have been nice to have a dad whom I could see having a successful relationship with my mother and see that and know what that looked like, and know that subconsciously try to replicate that, not to say that like I'm super fucked up and all the other stuff like that. I mean, like, I'm moderately fucked up, but like who isn't? Anyway. But yeah, so it would have been nice to have a dad, because I feel like there's a certain softness when it comes to fathers. I feel like there's a certain level of protection that a father can give that a mother can't. I feel like, mothers, they nurture and they do a lot of nurturing, and the fathers do a lot of protecting. And so my mother had to spend more time protecting than nurturing, and it would have been nice to have the protector in the home so that she could spend more time nurturing. Additionally, it also just would have been nice to have a dad in the home, because why the fuck not, to have a male figure in your life who is just accepting of who you are, and to also just like balance, again, to create that balance. And I started off with balance, but to create that balance. And to go back to my father figure, Sanddaddy, he was a good balance. He was a decent balance. Where my mother was overly protective, he was what we called the voice of reason. So when my mother was going off the deep end and going, no, 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 you can't do this, you can't do that, no, 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 he would be the person to sit with her and say, hey, think about this, think about that. hear what your kid is saying. Like, listen to what she's saying. Do you not understand this is where she's coming from? Don't jump to conclusions so quick. Don't, like, he would basically pull her back when she was being overprotective or like overly like just much. He would be able to kind of just like soften, that side of her. And whenever like there was an argument, or whenever like me or well, not really me, whenever my sisters, I should say, were going through it or going through something or like having a really bad blowout with my mom, like he was the person to like call the family meeting and like sit down and like we could all talk it out and all that other good stuff. And give my sisters the opportunity to speak, because again, my mom was in protector mode all the time. So she wasn't hearing, and he was. So he would be that gateway. And again, when my mom like would be really anxious about something, he would be there to like help with that anxiety. So he was a really cool father figure. He was a really good daddy figure. He was a really good son daddy. Now, of course, I'm talking, and you're like, well, you're saying you can't celebrate Father's Day, but you had like a really good father figure. I had a really good father figure. The problem with it was that, if I'm going to be 100% and 100% personal on this podcast, he wasn't my father. Okay. And I mean that in a multitude of ways. Not only was he my mother's boyfriend, but he had a family, right? He had his own family. He had an estranged wife and children with this woman. And so I had to share someone else's dad. And it wasn't until I got older, I got much older, did that start to bother me, that here I am sharing someone's dad. Growing up, I used to buy him like Father's Day gifts, and I used to make him cards, things like that, when I was much younger, because at this point in time, I'm like, oh, it's my mom's boyfriend, and he's Sand Daddy, and he's like a dad to me. He's my dad. I would say that to myself, of course, internally. Like, I wouldn't say it out loud, but like, and if anybody asked me like, oh, well, who's that guy? I'm like, oh, well, he was like a dad to me. Right. He used to run a furniture store in Brooklyn. Like, he used to be a manager of a furniture store, and then he ended up owning the furniture store. Ended up getting burnt down like a few months after he owned it, which was like really funky and weird, but whatever. And because of that, I learned like how to use a screwdriver, like watching him and his team like assemble furniture and picking up things like Philip head screwdrivers and flatheads and using drills and drill bits. And he was very handy. He was very, very handy. He used to come in and like help my mom put curtain rods up and like put up shelves, and again, put together, our tables and our chairs and our furniture and everything like that. So like, and watching him doing these things, of course, I'm jumping in and I'm doing that. So that's why I'm a handy person when it comes to like fixing things around the house. Like, give me a nail and a hammer and I know what to do with it. Give me a drill bit and some screws and I know exactly what to do with it. And that was all on account of growing up with this man, seeing what he was doing, and also him allowing me to join him in these tasks that he was doing, and helping me to be more dynamic, as opposed to just this woman who's like, oh, help me, I don't know what cock is. Is it the male chicken, or is it the thing that my boyfriend tells me I have to lick once in a while before we do the nasty? Like, I wasn't that. So I grew up with him, like my dad. But like I said, once I got older and he and my mom broke up, and my mom got remarried, it was kind of like this, like, why? Like, I didn't understand. And as that was all happening, I remember my sister like saying to me, like, the relationship between he and my mom, like, it never changed in those almost 20 years or so. Like, the relationship never changed. Like, He still had this estranged wife. He still had his family.